Captain Jake Morrison stared at the strange readings on his screen. The U.S. Frontier had been exploring space for 3 months without finding anything interesting. Now, deep in the void between star systems, his ship had detected something that should not exist. "Lisa, run that scan again," Jake said to his communications officer. Lisa Grant's fingers moved quickly over her control panel. Her face grew pale as the numbers appeared. "Captain, I'm picking up energy signatures unlike anything in our database. The pattern is too organized to be natural." Jake felt his heart beat faster. In all his years exploring space, he had never found proof of alien life. The readings showed a massive structure hidden behind a small moon, roughly the size of a human city, but clearly not built by human hands. "Ryan, how close can we get without being detected?" Jake asked his chief engineer. Ryan Brooks checked his instruments and shook his head. "Sir, if that thing has sensors as advanced as its energy output suggests, they probably already know we're here." As if summoned by Ryan's words, the space around them suddenly filled with bright light. A structure the size of a mountain appeared from behind the moon. Its surface was smooth and dark, covered with patterns that hurt to look at directly. Strange symbols glowed along its sides like alien writing. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," Lisa reported, her voice shaking slightly. "Put it through," Jake ordered. The voice that filled the bridge was cold and mechanical, speaking perfect English with no emotion. "Primitive vessel, you have entered Cephrian observation space. Your species has been monitored and found lacking. You will surrender your ship immediately and prepare for processing." Jake looked around at his crew. Security Chief Amanda Cole had her hand on her weapon, though they all knew it would be useless against something so massive. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Frontier. We come in peace and request diplomatic contact." "I..." Sound like laughter came through the speakers, but it held no warmth. "Peace is irrelevant. Diplomacy is unnecessary. Your species follows predictable patterns. You will surrender because resistance is impossible." Suddenly, the Frontier's weapon systems went dead. The lights dimmed as something drained their power. Through the view screen, Jake could see smaller alien ships emerging from the massive station. They moved with perfect coordination, like parts of a machine. "Captain, they're right," Amanda said quietly. "Our weapons are offline. Life support is dropping to minimum levels. We can't fight something like this." But Ryan Brooks was already moving. The engineer had spent his whole life fixing things that shouldn't work and making impossible repairs. "Captain, give me 2 minutes. I think I can surprise them." "What are you planning?" Jake asked. "Something they won't expect," Ryan replied, disappearing into the engineering section. The alien voice spoke again. "You have 30 seconds to surrender. After that, your ship will be disabled and your crew taken for study." Jake watched the countdown on his screen. 20 seconds. 15. 10. "Now, Ryan," Jake shouted. Suddenly, the Frontier's engines roared to life, but not in any way they were designed to work. Ryan had connected the main power core directly to the communication array, creating a feedback loop that sent all their energy back at the alien station in one massive burst. The effect was immediate. Lights across the alien structure flickered and went out. Explosions bloomed along its surface as systems overloaded. The smaller ships stopped their perfect formation and began spinning out of control. "Impossible," the alien voice said, and for the first time it sounded surprised. "This behavior is not in our models. Humans do not possess this technology." "We don't," Jake said with a grin. "We're just really good at breaking things." The Frontier shot forward, using the confusion to escape. But Amanda was already working at her station, recording everything they could about the alien technology. "Captain, I'm getting detailed scans of their systems. This information could save Earth. Behind them, the alien station was recovering. The voice came through their speakers one last time, now filled with something that might have been anger. You have made an error, humans. The Zephyrian Empire does not forget. We will study this encounter. We will learn. And we will return. As the Frontier jumped to hyperspace, Jake looked at his crew. They had just made first contact with an alien empire, and it had gone about as badly as possible. But they were alive. They had information, and somehow they had surprised beings who claimed to be able to predict everything. Lisa, send a priority message to Earth Command, Jake ordered. Tell them we found aliens, they're hostile, and they're coming. Also tell them that they might not be as invincible as they think. In the weeks that followed, the encounter would be analyzed by every military expert on Earth, but none of them could have predicted what Jake Morrison and his crew had really done. They had not just escaped from the most powerful empire in the galaxy. They had done something far more dangerous. They had shown the Zephyrians that humans could not be predicted. And in a society built on the certainty of mathematical models and behavioral patterns, unpredictability was the most terrifying weapon of all. The war was coming, but for the first time in their long history, the Zephyrian Empire was not certain they would win. High Commander Vexthal stood before the massive, holographic display in the war chamber of Dominion Prime. The capital world of the Zephyrian Empire had never seen defeat, and its gleaming towers reached toward the stars, like monuments to conquest. But today, something was different. Show me the report again, Vexthal commanded. The display showed the encounter with the human ship called Frontier. Vexthal had watched this recording dozens of times, and each viewing brought more questions. His tactical computers had analyzed every second of the battle, but they could not explain what had happened. Fleet Admiral Kethmer entered the chamber, his 4 arms carrying data tablets filled with calculations. He had conquered 17 different star systems for the Empire, each victory following the same predictable pattern. Kethmer had never failed to crush resistance within the calculated time frame. The behavioral models are incomplete, Kethmer reported. These humans acted outside all known parameters. When faced with superior force, species either surrender immediately or fight using their strongest weapons. The humans did neither. Vexthal studied the Admiral with his large, dark eyes, explained their strategy. They had no strategy, Kethmer said, confusion clear in his voice. They used a technique that damaged their own ship to create an unexpected energy burst. No rational species would risk destroying themselves for such a small tactical advantage. The High Commander turned back to the display. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled the galaxy for over 1,000 years by understanding exactly how every species would react to their presence. Fear led to surrender. Pride led to foolish attacks. Desperation led to predictable last stands. But the humans had shown something new. Deploy the 5th Pacification Fleet, Vexthal ordered. Standard intimidation protocols should be sufficient. These humans will see our power and surrender like all the others. Meanwhile, on Earth, Admiral Helen Carter sat in the emergency meeting of the United Earth Defense Council. The room was filled with the planet's best military minds, but they all looked worried. The data from the Frontier painted a picture of an enemy unlike anything humanity had ever faced. The alien empire spans most of our galaxy, reported Dr. Alex Turner, Earth's leading expert on alien psychology. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. Based on the ship designs we recorded, they've been conquering worlds for longer than human civilization has existed. Admiral Carter studied the tactical displays. The Zephyrian ships were built like floating cities, designed for overwhelming firepower and perfect coordination. Against such an enemy, Earth's scattered defense fleets seemed like toys. What do we know about their psychology? she asked. Dr. Turner pulled up his analysis. They appear to be a highly organized species that values order and predictability above all else. Their entire military doctrine is based on mathematical models that predict enemy behavior. They've probably never faced an opponent they couldn't understand. Then we'll give them something they can't understand, Admiral Carter said quietly. The first sign of the Zephyrian attack came 3 weeks later. Long-range sensors detected massive ships entering human space at the edge of the solar system. Admiral Kethmer had brought a fleet of 50 vessels, each one larger and more powerful than anything in Earth's Navy. Captain Steve Parker commanded the defense station at Titan. He watched the alien fleet approach and felt his hands shake. The enemy ships moved in perfect formation, their weapons already charging for what would clearly be a demonstration of power. But instead of waiting for the attack, Steve did something unexpected. He launched every ship under his command, not toward the enemy fleet, but in 50 different directions. Mining ships, cargo haulers, passenger transports, and military vessels all scattered across the solar system like seeds in the wind. Admiral Kethmer watched this response with growing confusion. They are running, he told his tactical officer, but their pattern makes no sense. A retreat should be organized, directed toward their strongest defensive position. Perhaps they are cowards, the tactical officer suggested, but then the scattered human ships began to attack, not the massive Zephyrian vessels, which would have been impossible to damage, but the communication relays, supply lines, and sensor networks that the Empire had established throughout human space. Lieutenant Kate Rogers piloted a converted mining ship straight into a Zephyrian communication satellite. The explosion was tiny compared to the alien fleet's firepower, but it cut off their connection to 3 star systems. Across human space, similar attacks were happening simultaneously. Admiral Kethmer realized with growing alarm that the humans were not retreating. They were swarming. Like insects attacking a giant, they were too small and too many to target effectively. But each successful attack weakened the Empire's ability to coordinate their forces. This is not how species behave when faced with superior power, Kethmer said to himself. His computers kept trying to predict the next human move, but every calculation failed. The humans would attack supply lines when they should be defending their homeworld. They would sacrifice valuable ships to damage minor installations. They would retreat from winnable battles and attack impossible targets. Within a week, the Zephyrian Fifth Fleet found itself spread across dozens of star systems, chasing human raiders who refused to stand and fight. Every time they concentrated their forces to crush one group of attackers, 3 more groups would appear somewhere else. Commander Tony Blake led the most daring raid of all. His small squadron approached the Zephyrian command ship, flying flags of surrender. Admiral Kethmer, following standard protocols, prepared to accept their submission. But when Blake's ship docked with the alien vessel, it was not carrying defeated soldiers. It was carrying explosives. The resulting blast destroyed half of the Zephyrian orbital command structure and left their fleet without central coordination. Back on Dominion Prime, High Commander Vexthil received reports that made no sense. The Fifth Fleet, which should have achieved victory within days, was requesting reinforcements. The humans were not surrendering. They were not fighting according to any known pattern. And somehow they were winning. For the first time in 1,000 years, a Zephyrian military operation had failed to achieve its objectives. The Empire's perfect record of conquest had been broken by a species they had dismissed as primitive. And worst of all, Vexthil realized that he had no idea what the humans would do next. The war had begun, but the rules had changed, and the Zephyrian Empire was learning that some enemies could not be calculated, predicted, or easily defeated. Captain Lucy Thompson had never thought her mining ship would become a weapon of war. The ore hunter was built for breaking apart asteroids, not fighting alien empires. But when the Zephyrians invaded the Kepler system, every human ship had become part of the defense. "Remember, we're not trying to destroy their ships," Lucy told her crew over the communication system. "We just need to make them think twice about coming here." The Zephyrian dreadnought, Absolute Victory, hung in space like a dark mountain. Its weapons could destroy planets, and its shields could withstand the combined firepower of Earth's entire fleet. But it had one weakness that its designers had never considered. It was not built to fight. Mining equipment. Lucy's plan was simple and completely insane. Instead of attacking the alien ship with weapons, she would use her mining tools to literally take it apart piece by piece. The gravitational mining beam that could crack open asteroids might just be able to tear through alien hull plating. "Target their weapon ports," Lucy ordered. "If we can't punch through their shields, maybe we can pull their guns right out of their ship." The mining beam locked onto one of the dreadnought's massive cannons. The Zephyrian shields were designed to stop energy weapons and projectiles, but they had no defense against a focused gravity field that simply grabbed parts of their ship and pulled. Inside the Absolute Victory, alarms began screaming. War Commander Zek Thara watched in disbelief as one of his primary weapons was torn from its mounting and dragged away into space. His tactical computers had no explanation for what was happening. "How are they damaging us through our shields?" he demanded. "Unknown, War Commander," his tactical officer replied. "Their weapon does not register as a threat in our database. It appears to be some form of industrial equipment." Lucy's mining ship was joined by 5 others, each one using their tools in ways they were never designed for. Cargo haulers used their loading arms to grab onto alien fighters and spin them, helpless through space. Construction ships fired building materials like projectiles, clogging alien weapon systems with metal foam and quick-setting concrete. The battle lasted 6 hours, and when it ended, the mighty Absolute Victory was drifting powerless through space. It had not been destroyed, but it had been completely disabled. More importantly, it had been defeated by converted civilian ships. Using construction tools. News of the victory spread through human space like wildfire. But the real war was happening on the ground of the 3 worlds that the Zephyrians had managed to invade. Major Chris Davis crouched in the ruins of New Boston on the colony world of Haven. The Zephyrian occupation forces had taken the city within hours, expecting the human population to submit to their efficient administration. Instead, they found themselves facing something they had never encountered: a population that refused to be efficiently administered. "The key is to make them waste resources," Chris explained to his resistance cell leaders. "They're used to conquered people who either fight openly or give up completely. We're going to do neither." Dr. Patricia Moore had studied military psychology for 20 years, but she had never applied her knowledge to alien minds. Working with Chris, she designed a campaign of psychological warfare that targeted the Zephyrian need for order and predictability. Aliens expected sabotage attacks on important targets. Instead, the humans sabotaged random, unimportant things. They would disable streetlights in residential areas, jam communication frequencies used for weather reports, and steal supplies that had no military value. The effect on the Zephyrian garrison was devastating. Their entire culture was built on logical, efficient systems. When faced with illogical, inefficient resistance, they began to make mistakes. Commander Velther led the occupation of New Boston. He had pacified dozens of worlds using standard protocols, establish control, implement efficient administration, and wait for the population to accept their new reality. But the humans refused to accept anything. They attacked our food distribution center, his aide reported. But instead of destroying it, they added spices to all the rations. Our soldiers refused to eat the altered food, fearing poison. Were the rations poisoned? Velther asked. No, Commander. They just taste different. Chemical analysis shows the additions are harmless flavor enhancers. Velther felt something he had never experienced before. Frustration. The humans were not trying to kill his soldiers or drive them away. They were simply making their lives annoying and unpredictable. But the psychological effect was worse than open warfare. His troops were becoming nervous, jumping at shadows, expecting attacks that never came. Meanwhile, in space, the Zephyrian military was learning that every human victory created new problems. Admiral Kethmer had finally adapted his tactics to counter the human swarm attacks, but the humans immediately changed their strategy. Commander Ben Foster led a squadron of modified passenger ships in what he called the diplomatic offensive. Instead of attacking Zephyrian vessels, his ships would approach alien fleets, broadcasting messages of friendship and cultural exchange. They would share human music, art, literature, and scientific discoveries. The psychological impact was unexpected. Zephyrian crews, who had been trained to expect either resistance or submission, found themselves listening to human symphonies and reading human poetry. Many of them had never encountered a species that created art for its own sake, rather than for military or political purposes. Some alien ships began responding to the broadcasts, asking questions about human culture. These unauthorized communications horrified Zephyrian Command, who discovered that exposure to human creativity was making their crews ask dangerous questions about the purpose of conquest. Admiral Kethmer was forced to issue orders forbidding his crews from listening to human transmissions. But the order itself created more problems. Now his soldiers were curious about what they were forbidden to hear, and black market recordings of human music began circulating through the fleet. War that the Zephyrians had expected to win in weeks had now lasted for months. Every tactical adjustment they made was met by a new human strategy they had never seen before. Worse, their own forces were beginning to show signs of the unpredictability they were fighting against. War planner Zekthara, the Empire's greatest strategic mind, spent sleepless nights trying to understand the human approach to warfare. Finally, she realized the terrible truth. The humans were not following any grand strategy at all. They were simply adapting, experimenting, and trying new things faster than the Empire could respond. They are not trying to win, she reported to High Command. They are trying to avoid losing, and they are willing to try anything to achieve that goal. We cannot predict their actions, because they do not know what they will do next themselves. 4. An empire built on the certainty of mathematical models and behavioral predictions. This was the most terrifying enemy they could face, an opponent who embraced uncertainty as a weapon. High Commander Vexthal had not slept properly in weeks. The war chamber of Dominion Prime had become his permanent home, filled with tactical displays showing the impossible reality of the human conflict. For the first time in Imperial history, the war computers could not calculate a path to victory. Show me the probability models again, he ordered his chief analyst. The holographic display filled with numbers that made no sense. Victory probability, 43% and falling. Enemy behavior prediction, complete failure. Recommended strategy, none available. How is this possible? Vexthal asked, though he had asked the same question every day for a month. We have superior technology, larger fleets, and more resources. The mathematics should guarantee our success. War planner Zekthara entered the chamber, carrying yet another report of human activities that defied logical explanation. High Commander, the humans have launched their most unusual operation yet. The display showed a human fleet approaching Nexus 7, one of the Empire's core industrial worlds. Captain Maria Santos commanded 12 ships, barely enough to threaten a single Zephyrian patrol vessel. But instead of attacking the planet's defenses, Her fleet took up orbit and began broadcasting. What are they transmitting? Vexthal asked. Everything, Zekthara replied. Human music, literature, historical records, scientific discoveries, philosophical writings, and art. They are sharing their entire culture with our civilian population. Vexthal watched in growing alarm as the reports came in from Nexus 7. The human broadcasts were not weapons in any traditional sense, but their effect on the Zephyrian population was devastating. Citizens who had lived their entire lives under the ordered certainty of imperial rule were suddenly exposed to ideas they had never imagined. The humans shared stories of individuals who challenged authority and succeeded. They broadcast music that expressed emotions the Zephyrians had no words for. They transmitted scientific theories that suggested multiple ways to understand the universe, rather than the single official imperial version. Within hours, Nexus 7 was experiencing something unprecedented, civil unrest. Not violent rebellion, but something far more dangerous to the Empire's stability. Citizens were asking questions. They wanted to know why human art was forbidden, why human scientific methods were not taught, and why the Empire had never mentioned that other species could create beauty. Shut down all communication networks on Nexus 7, Vexthul ordered. We have tried, High Commander, Zekthara replied. But the human broadcasts are using frequencies we never considered security threats. They are transmitting on entertainment channels, educational networks, and even emergency communication systems. Captain Maria Santos' voice came through the speakers as her fleet prepared to leave. We're not here to conquer you, she said calmly. We just wanted to show you that there are other ways to live, other ways to think, other possibilities than endless conquest. After the human fleet departed, Nexus 7 was never the same. The ideas they had shared continued to spread through conversations, copied recordings, and secret meetings. The Empire's perfect order began to crack as citizens imagined alternatives to their structured existence. But the real damage was happening in the Imperial military itself. Admiral Kethmer stood before his assembled fleet commanders, trying to explain tactics. That no longer made sense. The humans refused to follow logical patterns, he said, exhaustion clear in his voice. We position our forces to counter their most likely strategy, and they do something completely different. We adapt to their new tactics, and they immediately change again. Fleet Captain Morthic raised a concern that chilled every commander present. Admiral, my crews are beginning to imitate human unpredictability. Yesterday, one of my ship captains decided to paint his vessel bright colors because he thought it might confuse enemy targeting systems. When I demanded an explanation, he said, he was trying to think like a human. The psychological impact of fighting humans was spreading through the Zephyrian military like a disease. Soldiers who had been trained for perfect obedience were starting to think for themselves. Officers who had followed orders without question were beginning to suggest alternative strategies. Lieutenant Ben Foster was leading a reconnaissance mission when he discovered something that would change the entire war. His small ship intercepted Zephyrian military communications and found that the Empire's forces were arguing among themselves. Admiral Carter needs to hear this, Ben told his communications. Officer, the aliens are having the same problems we used to have. They're not acting like a single unified force anymore. The recording Ben brought back to Earth Command revealed the shocking truth. The Zephyrian Empire was experiencing doubt for the first time in its 1,000-year history. Military commanders were questioning orders. Civilians were imagining alternatives to imperial rule, and the entire structure of their society was beginning to shake. Dr. Alex Turner analyzed the intercepted communications with growing excitement. They're not just losing battles, he reported to Admiral Carter. They're losing their certainty. For a species that built their entire civilization on predictable order, uncertainty is the ultimate weapon. But the humans were not finished. Admiral Carter approved the most audacious psychological operation in military history. Instead of attacking more Zephyrian worlds, human fleets began visiting them peacefully. They would arrive in orbit, broadcast greetings in the local language, share gifts of human art and music, and then leave without firing a shot. The effect was devastating to Imperial morale. Zephyrian commanders found themselves preparing for battles that never came. Their soldiers stood ready to repel invasions by enemies who only wanted to share poetry and scientific discoveries. High Commander. Vexthul received reports from across the Empire of the same phenomenon. Human visitors who came in peace, shared their culture, and departed as friends. The idea that warfare might not be necessary was spreading faster than any military conquest. They are destroying us without fighting, Vexthul realized with growing horror. Every contact with humans makes our people question why we fight at all. War planner Zekthara delivered the final blow to Imperial confidence. High Commander, I have completed my analysis of human military strategy. They are not trying to defeat us in battle. They are trying to show us that we do not need to fight. For the first time in his long military career, Vexthul felt something that the Zephyrian language had no word for. Fear. Not fear of death or defeat, but fear of the unknown. The humans had introduced the Empire to the most dangerous concept imaginable, the possibility that everything they believed might be wrong. The war was far from over, but the psychological victory belonged to humanity. They had achieved something no previous enemy had managed. They had made the Zephyrian Empire afraid of peace. Admiral Helen Carter stood on the bridge of the U.E.'s Harmony, watching the most unusual military operation in human history unfold. Operation Prometheus was not an attack or a defense, but something entirely new. A massive information campaign, designed to reach every corner of the Zephyrian Empire simultaneously. All ships report ready, Admiral, her communications officer announced. Begin transmission, Carter ordered. Across the galaxy, human ships that had been captured and studied by the Zephyrians suddenly activated hidden communication systems. The aliens had learned to copy human technology, but they had never understood its true purpose. Every device they had examined was also a transmitter, and now they all spoke with one voice. The message was simple but revolutionary. It was the story of humanity's war against the Empire, told not as a tale of military victory, but as an example of what was possible when people refused to accept that conquest was inevitable. Captain Jake Morrison, now promoted to Admiral after his historic first contact, delivered the final part of the transmission. We fought not because we wanted to destroy you, but because we wanted to remain free. Freedom is not something you take from others. It is something you give to yourself. The effect across the Zephyrian Empire was immediate and unprecedented. On world after world, citizens who had never questioned imperial authority began asking why conquest was necessary. Military commanders who had spent their lives following orders without question started wondering if those orders were just. High Commander. Vexthul watched the reports flood in from across his empire. Peaceful demonstrations on core worlds. Military units refusing to attack human positions. Entire star systems declaring themselves neutral in the conflict. The empire that had ruled through strength and certainty was collapsing under the weight of a simple question. What if there was a better way? High Commander, War Planner Zekthara said quietly, I believe we must consider the unthinkable. Speak, Vexthul replied, though he already knew what she would say. We must request negotiations with the humans. The word request had never before appeared in a Zephyrian diplomatic communication. For 1,000 years, the Empire had demanded, conquered, and commanded. But now, for the first time, they were asking. The peace talks were held on Havens Gate, a neutral space station that had been built by both species working together. Ambassador John Mitchell led the human delegation, accompanied by Dr. Sarah Williams, whose expertise in alien psychology had proven invaluable throughout the war. When the Zephyrian delegation arrived, they brought a surprise that stunned the human negotiators. High Commander Vex Thul himself had come to the talks, along with war planner Zeke Thara and Admiral Kethmer. The Empire's highest leadership was personally seeking peace. "We come to discuss terms of human surrender," Vex Thul announced. Following traditional Imperial protocol. Ambassador Mitchell smiled gently. "I think there's been a misunderstanding, High Commander. We are here to discuss how our species can coexist peacefully. Neither of us needs to surrender." The concept was so alien to Zephyrian thinking that Vex Thul required several minutes to process it. "You do not seek our defeat?" "We never did," Dr. Williams explained. "We fought because you tried to conquer us. But if you're willing to let us live freely, we have no reason to continue fighting." The negotiations that followed were unlike anything in galactic history. Instead of discussing terms of surrender or conquest, the representatives of both species explored ideas that neither had considered before: mutual cooperation, cultural exchange, and shared exploration of the unknown regions of space. Admiral Kethmer, who had led the failed invasion of human space, found himself fascinated by human military philosophy. "You fought a war you never intended to win," he said to Admiral Carter during one of the breaks in negotiations. "We fought a war we never intended to lose," Carter replied. "There's a difference. We weren't trying to defeat you. We were trying to show you that we couldn't be defeated." The revelation that humanity had fought for principles rather than conquest created a transformation in Zephyrian thinking. For the first time, they encountered a species that viewed strength not as the ability to dominate others, but as the ability to remain free. Dr. Sarah Williams worked closely with Zephyrian psychologists to help them understand concepts their culture had never developed. The idea that conflict could end in mutual respect rather than domination, that diversity could be strength rather than weakness, and that cooperation could achieve more than conquest. The Terran-Zephyrian Accords, signed 3 months later, established principles that revolutionized galactic politics. For the first time in Imperial history, the Zephyrians recognized another species as equals. The treaty created joint exploration missions, cultural exchange programs, and mutual defense agreements. Captain Jake Morrison, now Admiral Morrison, was chosen to command the first joint human Zephyrian exploration mission. His ship, the UES Discovery, worked alongside the Zephyrian vessel Infinite Curiosity to map previously unknown regions of space. "It's strange," Morrison confided to his former communications officer, Lisa Grant, who was now his second in command. "A year ago, they were trying to conquer us. Now we're working together to explore the galaxy." "People change," Lisa replied, watching the alien crew members work alongside humans on the joint bridge. "We changed them, and they changed us too." The transformation was most visible in High Commander Vex Thul himself, who had taken the new title of Diplomatic Coordinator. At the formal celebration marking the first anniversary of the Accords, he shared a meal with human delegates and made a speech that would be remembered throughout galactic history. "The humans taught us something we never knew we were missing," Vex Thul said, speaking to representatives from dozens of species who had come to witness this new age of cooperation. "They showed us the value of worthy opponents who could become valuable allies. They demonstrated that true strength comes not from conquering others, but from inspiring them to be better than they were. The galaxy would indeed never be the same." At military academies throughout the former empire, a new lesson was taught alongside traditional strategy and tactics. Young officers learned about the day when the most powerful military force in galactic history met an enemy they could not predict, could not defeat, and ultimately could not resist joining. The humans had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They had not conquered their enemies. They had not destroyed them. Instead, they had done something far more powerful and lasting. They had made them friends, and in the far reaches of unexplored space, joint human Zephyrian crews worked together to discover new worlds, new species, and new possibilities. The Age of Conquest was ending, and the Age of Cooperation had begun. The fear that humanity had struck into the heart of the Empire had transformed into something else entirely. Hope for a future that neither species could have imagined alone.